The EMS Avenger podcast is sponsored by Zoll. What do you think about the notion that introverts don't like other people?
Yeah, we need to dispel that. And so that's probably the button I would push in EMS is for all EMS providers to know that about their EMS partners that are introverted or know it about themselves is introverts actually very much like people. Like I'm enjoying talking to you right now. I think about you a lot. And what'll happen later today is I'll replay this conversation in my head, right? I'm really enjoying talking to Jimmy, and it's not an aversion to social interaction. I want to have time in my day later where I can replay it and think about it and just like draw all I can from this conversation. I like this social interaction so much.
I'm Jimmy Apple, the EMS Avenger. This is the EMS Avenger podcast, and I am here with one of my favorite people, somebody who has been a friend and a mentor to me, Ginger Locke, host of the Medic Mindset podcast, also a paramedic instructor, and someone who's also with Prodigy, somebody that actually hosts some of my content that you can get CEs for. And today, we are going to be talking about the Introvert's Guide to EMS. It's ironic because both of us actually are forward-facing on social media, and both of us are actually some pretty significant introverts, and we've talked about this at length, and we thought it would be a great topic to talk about on a podcast. So welcome, Ginger.
Thank you, Jimmy. It is great to be chatting here with you. It is kind of funny, two introverts coming together to have a chat, but I think it actually makes sense that we enjoy these types of chats, the one-on-one kind of deep reflection.
And I think that's actually somewhat typical of an introvert, is that I am here for the introspection, right? I love a very deep conversation where you get to peel layers back off of things with one other invested party. But then when other people start coming into the room, then it starts becoming maybe a little bit more problematic. I don't know if that's the case for you.
It is, yeah. Cocktail parties are like my kryptonite. Small
Same.
talk. Yeah.
Yeah. What is an introvert?
I think it's important to define what an introvert is because there may be medics listening who think they're introverted, and they're wondering if they're introverted, or there may be medics listening that think they know some introverts and they've labeled them as such. And so we can define it maybe first by starting with what it's not. It's not introverted doesn't equal shy. Those two things are separated out. It doesn't mean they're not socially skilled. And the crux of the definition has to do with energy cost. And so it's that social interactions come at a cost. So while I can certainly love social interaction, I love people, there is a energy cost for me. And I think that's the takeaway. The usual definition is, where do you recharge, right? This is kind of the single question one could ask themselves is, when my energy is depleted, would I rather be around people to recharge, or would I rather kind of retreat into solitude to recharge my batteries? Which would be
I like the whole energy cost thing because there is real math going on a daily basis for me when it comes to being social, and that is particularly true now as I've become more recognizable. I mean, every hospital I go to in the Atlanta area, there's bound to be an EMS crew that's going to recognize me and wants to chat, and that's great, and I love that. But when I go to conferences too, there's a real cost to that interaction, and I'm there for as long as it needs to be on. The question, like you said, is how long now is it going to take to recharge, and what am I going to use to recharge? What do you use to recharge?
Solitude. And so that means gardening. That means piddling around the house. I can be in solitude with my wife, my partner. That still feels like solitude. But basically just alone time in my head. Sometimes I'll tell friends or people who love me, like, oh, today my head's in the clouds. And that just means I'm really enjoying ruminating on things, and that's where I'm recharging my batteries, just being in my head. So that's walking, that's whatever, right? Just usually some type of body movement to do that also.
That's what I call my dissociative time. I need either to read or, like you, I need to get moving. Something that's great for me is to get out on a hike, something that's actually really challenging. A lot of people think about hiking. They think of walking around a paved path around a lake, but to me, it's actually getting out in something very rugged and challenging. And something that's even exhausting, but it's the putting the energy into something else sometimes that actually builds the energy back up for me. And I can thrive in solitude. And silence. I'm not somebody that has the TV on in the background.
Same.
I rarely have music going on. There's a room, and this room has gone viral on social media. It's at some sort of university where you go in there and it's absolute quiet, and it's always advertised that people can't survive something like I think 40 minutes or something like that without going crazy, right? And I always joke that, at the hour mark, they're like, you have to come out. And I'm like, just 5 more minutes.
I've been in one of those rooms that takes away all the sound through acoustic tiles and things like that. And, you can hear your internal organs and like blood rushing through your carotids and things like that. It's wild, very disorienting.
It's challenging for me now because I have tinnitus, and so absolute quiet is never, there's actually no such thing as absolute quiet for me. But the last time I experienced something close to it was going to Colorado a couple of years ago and getting out of the car when we had got to the Airbnb, and there was nothing around us, and it was just absolutely amazing. But so I don't want to just focus on being introverted. I want to talk about what being introverted is like in being a very extroverted field. It seems like almost like a contradiction. We talk about people getting into EMS because they're adrenaline junkies, and they're here for the lights and sirens and for the intensity of it. And I have never been in it for any of that. I am challenged by problem solving and the challenge, of providing care to people, and the gift of being able to provide care to people. And it has never been about the energy for me. How common do you think it really is to have people who are like really, truly introverted in a field like this?
I have a sample of students that I teach in a paramedic program at a community college. And so I see a cohort come in every semester. We don't do any type of Myers-Briggs testing or anything like that, so I wouldn't know how they would self-report. But to me, it appears about 50-50 introverts. And in going to some social gatherings with EMS folks, I think there's more introverts among us than you'd really guess, right? If you're just thinking of the profession, like you said, adrenaline junkie and kind of loud and chaotic and gregarious. I think there are actually more introverts among us than we think. There was a study, I looked this up, Jimmy, there was a study of emergency medicine residents, and I think it was around 30% self-reported introversion.
Do you think that introverts are thrivers or just survivors in EMS?
I would back it all the way up to American culture. Anywhere in American culture, our cultural values are historically, we favor orators or people who are, we think of leadership as being the person willing to talk and take action, right? And so I think, as opposed to some Eastern cultures where silence and rumination and all these things are valued, I think American culture is kind of like that attention economy, and this idea of who can have the most attention kind of wins in our economy. And so your original question was, in EMS, are they thriving or surviving? I think we're all kind of surviving in American culture.
Enough.
In EMS, we do have some built-in breaks. There are times where it's just you and your partner. And so how you choose to negotiate that with your partner, I think your partner is probably the most important part of the job in general, and especially if you're an introvert, because introverts need that time to recharge. If you have a partner who can allow for that, that's everything. And if you don't, you're kind of your energy is depleted doubly.
I think about the spectrum there. I had a partner, one of my favorite partners, and she was very introverted, and we could go 4 hours and not say a word, just be sitting in the truck doing whatever it is we're doing, reading or whatever, and there wouldn't be a word spoken. And then, the energy would return and we start talking again. But then I've also had somebody who was extremely extroverted, and at that time, the power balance was a little bit different. I wasn't a veteran in the field, and so I wasn't initiating a lot of things, and I didn't have a lot of agency on the truck. And so in between calls, he would drive us to a fire station where there was like 8 or 9 or 10 people.
Yeah.
And it was just incredibly socially taxing for me. And I didn't enjoy that at all. There was never a moment where we weren't being stimulated. I was thinking, though, as you were talking, that maybe EMS is even structured a little bit sometimes for introverts. Introverts don't mind talking, I don't think, to other people, and they don't mind being the center of attention. It just has to be structured so that they don't have to seize being the center of attention, if that makes any sense. And there is a natural pivot towards the team leader on a call to, questioning the patient and talking to the nurses, talking to doctors, and it's a natural flow into an attention position, as opposed to at a party where there was a huge burden to overcome to talk to other people or become the center of attention. And being unwittingly given the center of attention is just, an absolute nightmare at a party. So,
yes, I think what you're saying, to summarize, is that the role is, of course, you have the attention. Like you don't have to grab it; it just exists. Is that what you mean? You don't have to jockey for it or put yourself out there. It's just known. It just is within the role of a paramedic or EMT that's the leader.
Sure. And I think that, there's a lot of nurture that goes involved there as far as why that is for some people. Like for me, there was a little bit maybe of lingering inferiority complexes from being younger, or a little bit of imposter syndrome where there is a risk to stepping out and talking, initiating a conversation with someone, maybe a fear that they're not going to appreciate the conversation, or that you're going to say something dumb, or that you're not up to the task with a certain person or a certain group. What do you think about the notion that people assume that introverts don't like other people?
Yeah, we need to dispel that. And so, that's probably the button I would push in EMS, is for all EMS providers to know that about their EMS partners that are introverted, or know it about themselves. Is introverts actually very much like people. Like, I'm enjoying talking to you right now. I think about you a lot. What'll happen later today is I'll replay this conversation in my head, right? I'm really enjoying talking to Jimmy, and it's not an aversion to social interaction. It is just that I want to have time in my day later where I can replay it and think about it and just like draw all I can from this conversation. I like this social interaction so much. Mm-hmm. And so remind me your original question, Jimmy.
The concept that introverts don't like other people.
Right. Yeah, that's just not the case. Those two things aren't tied at all.
I have battled that perception for a good part of my adult life, that I don't like other people. Part of it is just the resting bitch face. Can't do anything about it. It's just the way that my face sets. But, I think that with introverts as well, there's a challenge of getting to the conversation that stimulates you. And so maybe you're a little bit hesitant to engage because you want to be rewarded by that conversation. And I will admit for me that being in a conversation that is lacking depth is something that I'm desperately trying to escape from. I I can't be talked at for long amounts of time, and my attention will be gone too within minutes. But I don't want to be dragged through a quagmire of weather and sports and just the what have yous. And so I think that contributes as well to the perception that introverts don't like people because they just maybe are a little bit hesitant to engage with something that they may even, at the risk of sounding a little stuck up, maybe a little superficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's small talk. Those conversations are also exhausting for me. Like at the end of this conversation with you, I'll feel more or equal amount of energy as when we started, versus if I were to just step into a room, like a conference that you were talking about. Conferences are something I had to really figure out once I started going, of how to survive those and thrive there. I think I'm with you. I want something later that I'm going to chew on, or that sparked my creativity or gave me a reframe of the world, or something that kind of intellectually activated me. Am I socially skilled at the small talk? Probably not. I'm just never really figured out how to do that. So I'll often just try to get people going with me with something a little deeper. I try to get them there.
Yeah, that is not my superpower at all. I have tried to make small talk with people, and just like you, I don't have the skill. I mean, if we have something in common, obviously there's maybe something to work with there. But, being in a room with someone where there is such little commonality, it is just an absolute challenge to be an initiator. And for the most part, I'll give up very quickly. It's fine if somebody else wants to raise things. And I think actually introverts do thrive when they're on kind of like the receiving end of questions by someone. That's really easy to navigate. And it's comfortable, even if it's a little bit superficial. But having to guide someone through a conversation, especially, when maybe you're a little bit more obligated to, I'm a designated preceptor at my job, so when you're training and you have somebody with you all day and there's a little bit of downtime, you don't want them to feel abandoned. And so that can be challenging for me to make sure that we're keeping a conversation flowing. They feel like I'm friendly, that I'm interested in them,
Yeah. I think figuring out what to do with your EMS partner or someone you're precepting is key. And so do you think, Jimmy, just having that conversation up front, I'm curious if you do that with your learners that you're precepting, do you have that conversation up front of, hey, there's going to be 20 minutes here and there, I'm just going to sneak away and go recharge my batteries? Do you preface that? Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about myself as an introvert over the last, I would say, 10 years, that I've really just kind of owned it rather than just keeping it off to the side. And just telling people, hey, just so you know, number one, I don't look happy. I actually am happy. Number two, I'm not great at initiating conversations, so just be patient with me there. And number three, there are times that I just need to go and dissociate for a few minutes and recharge. And so that's super helpful. And it's, you know what? It quite often my partner might be introverted, and they're so relieved to hear that and have permission to, they themselves, give themselves those breaks.
You talked about owning it. I think that's the key, is some self-acceptance. I think culturally in the U.S., introversion is considered like a problem or a pathology, or not the norm. And so once you kind of get over that hump and realize, like, oh, there's a bunch of other introverts that are doing great things. In fact, some of our greatest thinkers in all of history were introverts, right? Once you get some self-acceptance and then figure out how to communicate that to others in a way that with, like, you really care, that they understand this about you, that it's you want them to know this about you, and explain it. So they're not just left wondering, like, why is Ginger tuning me out when I'm just chattering about pop culture or quoting movie lines or something like that, right? If it's just chatter, 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 I'm just tuning it out. Like if I'm driving the ambulance and you're my partner and just every thought is coming out of your mouth, at some point I'll just kind of tune it out. And so them just understanding how my brain works, right? Communicating that. Yeah.
And speaking of how brains work, it's also important for us to be understanding as introverts of extroverts.
Yeah.
And it's something that maybe I haven't put a lot of thought into, is like, what is specifically an extrovert and how does their brain work? Have you put any thought into that?
I don't know from personal experience, but I was married to one for 15 years.
Actually, same. Yeah.
Yeah. What I gathered in lots of conversations, because it was a point of difficulty for us, right? Because when my ex-wife worked from home, so all day she was home alone, and she was an extrovert. So at the end of the day, she would want to go and be out with people. I had the reverse thing, being an educator. So it was a kind of a point of we both weren't getting our one of us wasn't getting our needs met. And we would always be the last to leave a party if it was her choice, right? She literally recharged batteries by talking to people and not talking to people about deep, meaningful things, just like the fun of banter, I guess.
Yeah.
There was that feature. And then the other feature was most of she processed out loud, right? So I process if I'm trying to come up with a solution to a problem, or there's something not quite like rectified in my brain, all that processing happens internally. And then once I have an understanding, then I'll communicate it to others. The extrovert that I lived with for 15 years, it was more just like processing externally with someone else in the room. And so it was just a very interesting setup.
That is an interesting dynamic. My ex-wife that I was married to for 15 years was incredibly extroverted, and it was a big joke about how introverted I was and how extroverted she was. And I think that, speaking only for the impact that I would have on an extrovert, I can say, looking back, that there's a lot of potential there for an introvert to negatively impact an extrovert, because I'm dragging someone who doesn't function in silence and solitude into a place that's not healthy for them. Don't want the TV on. I don't want the radio on. I don't want a lot of people around. Something maybe just happened that we need to kind of walk through carefully, and I need to be quiet so I can process that, and I'm getting irritated because I'm being forced to process it out loud. And
very well said, Jimmy. That's this is a perfect visual you've painted. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I wonder if even an introvert has a little bit more power. It's kind of like somebody standing on top of some sort of platform and somebody standing beneath it. If I'm the introvert standing beneath it, I have way more potential to pull that person down than they have to pull me up. And I think that may be kind of the introvert-extrovert relationship. And it's probably more easy navigable in EMS because you guys get built-in breaks from each other. It's much more complicated in a marriage, although it's still very complicated if you have a daily, if you have a partner that you're with every single day.
Well, maybe we could play that out, right? Imagine the extrovert in EMS being the partner to an introvert, and they're wanting to recharge batteries by dialogue, right? And banter, and there are two people alone, maybe in a station. There's no one else to talk to. The introvert doesn't provide them that. So back to your point of, I think you said the word power, particularly like self-reliance, is that the introvert doesn't need another person to recharge, versus an extrovert kind of desires that other person to recharge. And so there's one needs someone and the other one doesn't.
Yeah. And I kind of have been forced to respect that going from one job to another. I was in 911, where generally speaking, you were with only one other person for 12 hours. We didn't go back to a base, and so we would just be somewhere parked somewhere, and we had our calls where we saw some people and there could be brief exchanges. We went to the hospital, had a little bit of wall time where some brief exchanges, but mostly by yourself. And I actually realized that I had become incredibly isolated and siloed like that. And so now I have a job where I'm actually stationed out of a hospital. And so there's no private little truck or base that silos us away. And so I've been very purposeful about going to where a lot of people are and actually participating there and kind of like feeding the public social well there, drinking from that water and making sure I'm contributing something positive to that water as well. That's been a challenging exercise. I think a really healthy one, though, too.
What motivated that?
I think that a little bit of introspection on the previous job that I had, where essentially I had been there so long and had become so siloed and isolated that I felt like I almost left without making an imprint. I made an imprint maybe regionally because I was known, fairly well known, just being in the area so long, and I became known on social media. But at the company, people only had brief exchanges with me, and mostly kept to myself. Even during COVID, when we would have significant amounts of downtime at the hospitals, where 6-7 crews might be there for hours, I would pull out my Kindle, just in the middle of the room with everyone. And I realized that building relationships are incredibly important. And as an introvert, even though I may not be inclined to pursue them, that doesn't mean that it's not good for me. In the same way that I may not be inclined to eat vegetables, but if I want to have a long, healthy, and thriving life, I just need to eat broccoli.
That brings up another, as you were talking, it made me think about this concept of an ambivert, right? The idea is that you're a little bit of both. Remember, very few things in humans or culture are binary, right? It's not just introverted or extroverted. We're usually on a spectrum, like most things that are psychological. And so I was remembering after COVID, again, after too much solitude, when we went back to campus, I was so thankful for community and that I could walk in the halls and see people and talk to them about meaningful things. I had really, really missed that. And so I maybe that's another key takeaway, is that introversion is not a yes-no thing. It's usually people are somewhere on the spectrum, and what they need today may be different than what they need in 10 years.
Sure. Do you find yourself, when you start becoming comfortable in a room, that you do see your level of, do you see any elements of extroversion starting to come out? I would say that for me, once I become comfortable with a group, maybe with like my tribe, that there is maybe a little bit more extroverted tendencies.
So maybe the question to ask is, because extroversion is not just about talking and interacting, to me, it's about the marathon and the duration. It's like, can I do this for hours and I don't feel depleted? Right? So maybe that's my question for you is, are you saying that you are more extroverted in that sense, that like, oh, I entered this room and then an hour later after talking, I felt of equal energy?
I wouldn't say after an hour in a room, but I would say after repeated exposures, when you start to get the feel of the people that you're around on a daily basis, I would say for me, there are leadership qualities that start to rise and people start to recognize that and point that out. And I think that I do see a little bit more extroversion display itself there. In fact, there's sometimes people who have only seen me in rooms full of people interacting with other people who were shocked to find out that I was an introvert.
Right.
So, or people who only know me from social media.
Well, that's because the amount, let's see, this is a core kind of takeaway, is that...
Because I know introverts who just are quiet no matter what.
Do you know introverts? It's kind of, maybe it's hard to know which introverts are introverts if they're not shy. Those are two different things. So I had this similar experience. I taught a student for 2 years finally I got together with them and their partner, me and my partner, on a social interaction. And she said, my wife was talking about how I'm an introvert, and the former student, now graduate, was like, "You're an introvert? How can that be?" Because they've seen me in the classroom, in this leadership role, enjoying the dialogue that we're talking about subject matter things. And the difference is, yes, I can enjoy all those things. And then by about 2 or 3 p.m., the rest of the day, I kind of need some solitude. So going back to you in these rooms or wherever, what is it that you're doing that makes you feel more extroverted, or that they've accessed this part of extroversion within you?
I can sense the volume of my voice getting louder. And rather than pivoting, and I think that this is another thing to discuss about introverts, is like the geography of where you place yourself in a room. I tend to, when I go into a room full of people that I don't know, I certainly wouldn't place myself in the center of the room or somewhere that would draw too much attention. And as I become more comfortable, my body language, my body starts to sway a little bit more. My arms start to flail a little bit more, and maybe I'm kind of moving around a little bit. Never to the point where I'm backslapping people or anything like that, and I still will collapse in a heap if somebody does like a shoulder grab or something like that. But I can see myself grabbing a little bit more spotlight as I become a little bit more comfortable.
And a little more comfortable with that spotlight.
Yeah. Which goes back again maybe to the introverts kind of like motivations, which is I wonder if introverts even really do seek spotlight, but it's just such a very specific way to get it. For me, like, social media was a godsend. Like, social media, like, literally almost saved me as an introvert, because I had all these things that I wanted to say and talk about and had no way to express it.
Right.
And then suddenly here's this thing. It's like, you know what? I don't have to interrupt anyone. I don't have to worry about if this person doesn't think that I'm as handsome or as pretty as they are or as smart as they are. I can just put this in here, and the people that appreciate it will, and the people that don't will just scroll.
Mm-hmm. I love it that you found that avenue. It reminds me of in education. When we went through COVID, we did online learning through Zoom. And suddenly I realized that there's this whole cohort of students that are introverted who wouldn't normally speak up in class, ask a question, interrupt the professor, just wouldn't speak. We're able to put in the chat session in Zoom questions or add-ons. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need a chat when we go back to campus, I need a kind of a chat board like that in the classroom for the introverted style.
What do you think are the strengths of an introvert as far as their performance goes in EMS? And do you think that there's any disparity between performance between introverts and extroverts in the role of EMS, not necessarily in healthcare?
I think like command presence, for example, I think both can have that. It's a skill. It's a learned skill. And so as you were describing this Jimmy in a room being an introvert or an extrovert, I heard what you were saying, like my body gets more relaxed and I can speak louder and things like that. But I really think an introvert and extrovert looks the same on an EMS call that they're running. I really believe that.
Could you tell the difference in a PCR? In a narrative?
I don't know. I think that is probably a factor of other personality types more than introverted and extroverted. What are your thoughts there?
I don't know, because the only time I really get to review a PCR is with my coworkers. We have a peer review system, so I know who it is that's writing it. So, if I would have to read the PCR in a vacuum, not knowing who it belonged to, So, do you think do you think that introverts maybe approach healthcare from a more contemplative side, whereas maybe extroverts, not healthcare, EMS, whereas extroverts maybe tend to be a little bit more drawn to the logistical, operational side of things, the trucks and the lights and sirens, and talking about the aircraft and the type of aircraft the people are flying in and just shiny things? Or is that, you think I'm reducing that to a ridiculous stereotype?
Introversion is about whether or not we introversion versus extroversion is about where we recharge. Is it with people or in solitude? I think that's the distinguishing feature. And so I will say this, maybe this is a little bit off of EMS, but I've often thought about like an extrovert's always like talking to others or hearing, in conversation. This is like my idea of them, just like constant conversation or music or stimulation of some sort. And so I wonder how much time they spend inside their head in contemplation and reflection and introspection. I wonder. I'm like, when are you doing that? But maybe they're doing it with others. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Here's what I know about, like, for me, for creativity is that I have to have enough solitude to be creative, because if I'm just consuming, watch a bunch of Netflix, watch a bunch of Jimmy on TikTok, listen to podcasts constantly, like I'm just putting input and I don't spend any time alone reflecting on all that input, nothing comes back out. So I don't know if that applies to EMS. What was your original question, Jimmy? Sorry.
Do you think that introverts tend to be maybe more on like pursuing EMS really as kind of an intellectual pursuit, like really like delving into the academia of things, whereas extroverts, and I'm not saying that, I'm certainly not making any statement on the intellectual capacities of anyone, just on what their pursuit may be. Do you think that maybe the extroverts tend to really pursue more of kind of the fast lifestyle in EMS?
Yeah, I'm kind of rethinking your question as maybe you're asking, like, do you think what initially attracted to someone to EMS? Like, is that an extrovert sees this versus introvert sees this that's appealing to them? I know for me, and this may be showing a little bit of ambivert on my part, for me, one of the appeals of EMS was I used to drive by when I was a kid on my way to my orthodontist. I'd drive by a fire station. I would see all these fires sitting around a picnic table outside their fire station. And they would just be chatting it up. And I'm like, oh, look at that. Like, they have a little tribe. Like, it reminded me of my sports ball teams. Or it's like, oh, it's like a little family away from family. Like, that'd be cool. It kind of looked like they were at camp, from a kid perspective. And so that actually appealed to me. So, and then your question of like, maybe an introvert is the part that appeals to them is this time where they can really work on like self-improvement and reflection on their performance and how do we solve this problem within EMS and kind of contemplation and the healthcare, medical, clinical questions that come up.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge to an introvert succeeding in this field?
Getting the right partner, I think, is super key. I think burnout city. If you are 24 hours with a partner who can't validate, appreciate, support your need for energy, replenishment, and solitude. That's probably the most important piece.
I think that is spot on,
Yeah.
especially when you said burnout.
Yeah.
I had to kind of look back at my time with the service that I was with for quite a while here. And I left simply because I wanted to be challenged more. I had been in 911 at this point for 20 years, and I wasn't being handed a lot on a daily basis that was challenging me, and I needed something that was pressing me to learn more and to take things to the next level. But in looking back, I realized that I was burned out, and I didn't recognize the sign that I was burned out. And the sign was that I had the luxury of picking partners for a while. They liked to send people with me who were kind of like in school, going through paramedic school, moving up the ladder, were eager learners and that sort of thing. And in the instance where I got a partner who was just going to be my MIC partner, I didn't respond very well. And the last partner I had actually didn't treat them very well. And I realized that was a sign of burnout, that, I couldn't be with a partner that wasn't balancing me out as an introvert. And, to go on the record, I have sent the words that I have needed to send to that person. But I think you are spot on that without the right partner, that it is going to be incredibly difficult to be happy on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that alignment, right? It's not that either are wrong, right, bad, good, bad. It's just the alignment is really important, that those personality traits are aligned. Or I think it's 2 steps. First, the paramedic that's introverted has to recognize it about themselves, recognize it, and know that they're, like, 'cause for a while I confused mine with anxiety. I was like, am I having anxiety? Why can't I be around people? And once I fully had a role model in my life who was an introvert, and they were like, no, nothing's wrong with you. If you just build some time into your day for quiet and solitude and all these things, you'll notice your anxiety goes away. Like, you can recharge your batteries. And so I think first that self-awareness, and then self-acceptance, and then figuring out how to pair partners who meet that. I mean, it's such a core need, right? You're talking about energy. You're talking about your literal physical and mental cognitive energy. And so that alignment is just key, because it's a marathon. It's sometimes 24-hour shifts, sometimes 48-hour shifts.
Who will break first between the introvert and the extrovert if they're not paired appropriately?
Oh, I think the introvert for sure. The extrovert can FaceTime people, and people can come to visit them at station. They can hop over to the fire department and have their company-wide dinner and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and just extrovert their face for 12 hours, and they got what they needed out of that,
there's only so long you can stay in the bathroom as an introvert and hide in there.
A question I have as an introvert, little lighthearted, is when you're texting people who maybe you don't text very often, like, when do you stop?
Yeah.
Just the lighthearted banter.
How do I stop? How do you
Well,
stop as one stop?
for me, I mean, you and I, if we get texting, we might actually go for a little while, and I don't think that there's really any question as to, any person's limits other than maybe time. But, there's people that I've texted that maybe I don't know that well, or who are very extroverted, and there's all these things that come back and forth, and memes and emojis and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I have reached the socially acceptable limit of maybe 4 or 5 happy exchanges with this person. I think it's time to stop now, but I don't know if that's the rules, or you're just supposed to be texting them. I don't know if extroverts just text each other all day and just never stop until they get exhausted.
Are you on any group chats, Jimmy?
Oh my God, no.
Mine are all on silence, and I just engage them as my batteries allow. But from what I can see, the extroverts are over there talking all the time, and it's
okay.
There's no end.
Yeah, I get included in like happy Thanksgiving or Merry Christmas group chats and stuff like that, and I'm like, Merry Christmas, and then I either silence the chat or leave the chat, because I just can't. I can't have that much stimulation,
Right.
7 people sending texts.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so,
hope
but-
people hear that and really absorb that. Like, we're being light and funny, but right, we finally, I don't know what both of our ages are, but I know what mine is, and it's, I'm getting towards the end of my 40s.
I'm
And
56.
it really took this long for me to first understand and second to honor it, right? And to no longer pathologize it. 15 years of marriage with an extrovert, I definitely pathologize it. Like, I am broken. Like, I am not doing this right. And so I really hope people hear what you're saying, that it's actually not a joke. It's really useful that you know this about yourself, that you're able to do all these wonderful things, have loving relationships, and it actually takes like purposefully engineering. That's what I guess the point is engineering your daily experience.
Yeah. And in reality, I'm happy to receive a random text from somebody I know. It actually makes me happy to be thought of,
Of course.
A group chat, when I open it up and say group chat, it's like, and for people who are listening, that was my kids know exactly what face I just made. Getting back to maybe a little bit more serious look at this, who do you think has the bigger challenge when it comes to their mental health in EMS, an introvert or an extrovert? Or is it really back to just having the right resources and recharge abilities?
Your question is about introverts and extroverts and who is affected in their mental health. Under the umbrella of mental health is suicidal ideation, suicide attempt, suicide completion. We know for a fact that human connection is one of the most important mitigating factors to things like suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. And so people that feel isolated, that is a big risk factor for suicidality. So I think, again, we say introverts have no problem. They like people very, 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 very much. And they want that intense, deep connection, in fact. But I think it's worth pointing it out there that if you're finding yourself so isolated as an introvert, and you haven't found your people yet, right? Your tribe, that does put people at risk for that mental health concern.
Sure. I think we've reached the end of our time, and I loved this conversation, and I hope that all the extroverts who are out there listening get something out of this and maybe some perspective on their introvert partner. And if you are introverted, then you probably just were stimulated hearing other introverts talking about being introverted. Ginger, I appreciate you appearing with me, and it's been a dream of mine for us to be on a podcast together for a long time, so I'm glad that we got to do that, and I'm super stoked that I will get to see you in Atlanta coming up, and then again in Austin. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's been a great discussion. You're great to hang out with. Thank you.
Dark clouds rising black and gray, screams of chaos where we lay. Lights are flashing, calling the brave. The